10 years in prison. And they sentenced me to what's known as a mandatory 10-year sentence, so I had no eligibility to get game time. It was 10 years, day for day, 3,650 days in a Florida State prison. And they tried to beat it into you. They take your name away and they replace it with a number. Mine was R18756. And for 10 years, I had to wear this ID on my chest. And every time they'd come around, they'd count me at 9:30 in the evening. They called it master roster count. I had to say, inmate Pisciotta R18756. And that's what they called me. And they tried to get me to accept that was my identity, and I did not. On me, and it sparked a vision that changed the way I did my time. And I came to the realization that I had given up 10 years of my freedom. I had made those choices. I did that. It was my actions that had done that. But one thing that I was not going to let them take from me was 10 years of life. And it changed the way that I approached doing time in prison. Instead of
From that moment on, I decided that I would use every single minute that the state of Florida had so graciously given to me to develop myself spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, and prepare myself for that day that they would eventually open the gates and send me out into the free world with a $100 check and a pat on my butt. In prison, a lot of people ask me, would you change that? Would you go back? Would you change it? While I would change the crimes, because obviously there were crimes and people were involved in those crimes, I would not change that I spent 10 years in prison, because prison made me who I am today. Without the bad, there would be no good. I'm sympathetic at all, because I know, and I heard Tony Robbins share this one time, that the bad things that happen to us, those are the things that make us who we are. Those are the things that press us and help us become who we ultimately become if we're going to be great. And so to give you guys just a little bit of context of what 10 years in prison is like, every one of you guys have this handy little computer, right? This little device. I think they call them iPhones. If you have something other than an iPhone, I don't know what's wrong with you, but everybody, we all have iPhones, right? Little plug for Apple there. These and everything on here, everything that we live our lives, and I can control my lights and my temperature, and I can spy on my dogs and my kids and my wife sometimes. Right from here, no matter where I am remotely, I can check messages, I can check Facebook ads, I can make money. Every single thing that is there did not exist in 1999 when I left. In the 10-year span that I was in prison, a couple of things that have kind of changed the world a little bit were invented. Facebook was invented. I know, a lot of you guys are like, I can't imagine a world, no Google, no Facebook. Who would we ask questions? When we're sick, where would we go to find out what's wrong with us if there was no Google? Where then all of those things were invented while I was in prison. The iPod. I'd never seen DVD, I'd never seen a flat screen television, I never saw a cell phone. We actually had beepers. You guys remember beepers? Beepers, right? It was cool to have one when I went to prison. And so in 2009, the state of Florida opens the gates and sends me out. They didn't train me. They didn't tell me how to use email, how to use a phone. They didn't tell me what had happened outside of those fences. And it's interesting and it's ironic that all of those things that were invented while I was in prison are responsible for me creating success. And I've learned to leverage every one of those tools.
And I just felt extremely impressed that I needed to be the one leper that reached back and said thank you. And what that meant was to be the guy that showed them, despite what the system is telling you, despite what the officers are telling you, despite what the other inmates around you are telling you, you can create success. You can build a life. You can come out the other side of those fences and you can be what God called you to be.